Everyone, welcome to our biggest chapter of Principles of Economics. We are going to be covering supply and demand, and we will start with demand. So welcome to section 1. So in this section, we are going to talk about the law of demand. Additionally, we'll talk about the substitution effect and the income effect and how they influence our decisions. I apologize, my dogs are being crazy in the background. So, we will also create we're actually just going to look at a demand schedule, and then we'll look at how we can interpret demand using a graph. So, that is what we're all going to cover in section 1. All right, so I want to give you a few sort of brainstorming questions to start. Supply and demand is something that can be very consumer driven. So I want you guys to think about your own experience as a consumer and answer the following questions. So first, I want to know, how do you decide what to buy? Like, how do you decide this is what I'm going to spend my paycheck on? What sort of things influence that decision? Additionally, I want to know what you do when the price of something you want or needs goes down. And on the flip side, what do you do when the price of something that you want or need goes up? So take a little bit of time to reflect on those questions before moving on in this lecture video. Here's some key terms for section 4.1. So first we have demand. This entire chapter 4 is all about demand, which is the desire to own something and the ability to pay for it. We'll talk today about the law of demand, which is this idea that consumers are going to buy more when a price is good, when it's lower, right? And they're going to buy less when the price is higher. We'll briefly discuss the substitution effect. So that is when consumers react to an increase in a good's price by consuming less of that good and by consuming more of a substitute good. We'll also talk about the income effect, which says that which is the change in consumption that results when a price increases and therefore causes real income to decline. We'll take a look at a demand schedule, which is a table that lists the quantity of a good that a person will buy at various price points in a market. A market demand schedule is going to be that exact same thing, except it's going to show all consumers in a market. So everyone that lives in Fargo versus just myself, right? And then a demand curve is just a graphical representation of that demand schedule. So we'll look at that as well. So how does the law of demand affect the quantity demanded? Price changes always affect the quantity demanded of a good because people will buy less when the price is high. By analyzing demand schedules and demand curves, we can evaluate how consumers will react to changes in price. So, when the price of a good is higher, you are going to buy less of it, right? So thinking back to your reflection questions, is that what you said when I asked you if the price of a good goes up, what do you do about it? Maybe you buy less of it, right? If the price of pop goes up, maybe you only buy one 12-pack instead of buying 3 for 12, right? And then on the flip side, when the price is lower, you may buy more. When something's on sale, you might buy like that item in bulk, right? Because it's on sale and it's such a good price. So demand, as I said, is the desire to own something and the ability to pay for it. You do not have demand for an item if you cannot also afford to pay for it. So the law of demand is the result of the substitution effect and the income effect. These are two ways that a consumer can change their spending patterns. And together, they explain why an increase in price always leads to a decrease in the amount of a good that consumers purchase. In other words, a decrease in demand. So this just demonstrates again what the law of demand says. As price goes up, demand goes, or as price goes down, as price goes down, demand goes up, and vice versa. As price goes up, demand goes down. So what happens to demand for a good when the price increases? This is your checkpoint question. So take a moment to think about what I said on the last couple slides and be sure that you can answer this question, because this is going to be vital information for your assessment in this chapter. All right, so changes in price act as an incentive. We briefly talked about incentives in chapter 1. And incentives for us help inform our economic decisions. And so a change in price acts as an incentive. Price changes always are going to affect quantity demanded because people buy less of a good when the price goes up. Okay. We're going to talk about both the income and the substitution effect and how they work together to change demand based on price changes. So this chart kind of demonstrates that. So we'll start with the substitution effect. The substitution effect takes place when a consumer reacts to the rise in the price of one good by consuming less of that good and more of an available substitute. So the substitution effect can also apply to a drop in prices. If the price for an item goes down, they are going to sell more of that item, maybe at the expense of their competitor. So in this case, if you go to a deli for lunch and there's a roast beef sandwich on special and there's chili on special, but the price of the sandwich is $5.25 and the chili is $2 today. The substitution effect says that there's going to be higher demand for chili because the price is lower. You just need lunch. So unless you really hate chili, why not get the $2 chili versus the roast beef sandwich that just increased in price? Then there's the income effect. So the income effect is the change in consumption that results when a price increase causes real income to decline. So economists measure consumption in the amount of a good that is bought, not the amount of money that is spent on that good. So it's about amount bought. Just like with the substitution effect, the income effect also is in operation when the price is lower. So if the price of something drops, you feel like you have more money, you feel wealthier. So you may buy more goods as a result of that lower price. Now, when we talk about real income, we're not talking about your paycheck actually changing. You're still bringing home the same amount of money. But if prices are low, for example, the price of gas is really low right now, I may feel like I have more money left over to spend because the price of that good is low, right? So if normally I would spend $70 a week on gas and now I spend $50, I may decide that this is a good time to fill up my gas canisters that are in the garage that I use for the lawnmower because the price is low and it's kind of like I have an extra 20 bucks, even though really don't, right? My paycheck didn't change any. So the income effect says when prices are lower, I feel richer, and therefore I go and spend that money on either more of the same good or just more items in general, right? All right, so another one of your vocab words was a demand schedule. And a demand schedule just really demonstrates to us that demand for a good falls when price rises and vice versa. So you can see on these demand schedules that if say at Spicy Pie, they have like $1 slice day, okay? If pizza is $1 per slice, they're going to sell a lot of slices, right? So I, as an individual, might decide I'm going to buy pizza for my whole family. So I buy 5 slices because it's affordable, right? And they just sell more across the board. Maybe throughout that whole market, that whole area, they're going to sell 300 slices of pizza that day, right? Where on a regular day, a slice of pizza at Spicy Pie might be $4 a slice. So I may just buy 2, right? Just for me. I'm just going to buy 2 slices because that's really all I feel like spending on pizza, right? So the quantity demanded is lower as an individual and also then for the market as a whole. So an individual demand schedule shows what I would do. The market demand schedule shows combined what everyone in the market is going to do. Okay, so then we could take those points and we could plot them on a graph, and we call that our demand curve. So we could make an individual demand curve, like Ashley's demand curve, and it shows how many slices of pizza that Ashley would buy at any given price point. And then the market demand curve is going to show what the demand for pizza is in an entire market. So that may be a neighborhood, it may be a city, it may be an entire region or an entire country. Okay. So the demand curve is just the graphic representation of the demand schedule. The vertical axis is always going to be labeled with prices at the bottom, lowest prices at the bottom, highest prices at the top, and then the horizontal axis is going to be labeled with the lowest possible quantity demanded at the left-hand side and the highest possible quantity demanded on the right-hand side. We can see in this graph that the demand curve is always going to be a negative slope because as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. So all demand schedules and demand curves reflect the law of demand in that way. They will always be a negative slope. Market demand curves are really only accurate for one very specific set of market conditions. They cannot predict changing market conditions. So there may have been one type of demand curve, market demand curve, before this pandemic started, and then the economy totally shifted. And so those demand curves that we were looking at 6 months ago are totally different now because people's income have changed, people have been laid off, the market has just completely changed, right? So a market demand curve is really only specific to the current market conditions, and those market conditions can change nearly overnight. All right, that is section 1, law of demand, demand curves, demand schedules. Those are your big things to know for this section. Please let me know if you have questions. This stuff is going to keep coming up for the next couple weeks as we cover supply and demand. Have a good rest of your day, guys.